Hey guys, this is God of Politics. I'm going to go into a brand new video, but before we get started with this video, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. Also follow me on Twitter and join the Discord. Those are both linked down in the description. But as I've been saying for the past couple of videos, I am setting a goal of 1,000 subscribers by May 27th. We're not even in April yet, and I'm only 79 subscribers away. We are on track to reach it, but in order to reach it, I do need your guys' continued support. So please like this video, subscribe to the channel, share with your friends, do anything you can to help me reach my goal of 1,000 subscribers. We are getting very close and even closer by the day. So you can see here that I have a map of the 2020 election by margin. Now I know it says 302 to 236, but this is using the projected electoral vote numbers for the next census, which you'll see why in a second. But I'm going to be talking about in this video the path to victory for Republicans. What is the path that they should take? What states should they focus on? What, parts of individual states should they focus on? And I guess I'm acting in this video as if I'm kind of like a GOP strategist, what they're going to do to try and win. So, of course, this is the map in the 2020 election. Then there was very, very close results. If you have a 1% shift, just a 1% shift towards Donald Trump, you have Arizona that flips, you have Georgia that flips, and you have Wisconsin that flips. And using the 2020 electoral vote numbers, Trump would actually get 269, which would go to the House and give him a victory. But, he would get a victory just from flipping three states that went within 1% in the 2020 election. We can see here, Wisconsin went by around 0.73%, Arizona went by 0.3%, and Georgia went by 0.23%. So, a 1% shift, Trump flips those three states. You do a 2% shift, Trump flips Pennsylvania in that scenario. You do a 3% shift, he flips Nevada, and then he flips Michigan. So, he can exceed his 2020 or 2016 margins just by flipping, 3% of the electorate towards his column. But going back to what the actual map turned out to be, it was a very close election. And while Joe Biden won by 7 million votes in the popular vote, that's not what matters. It comes down to the Electoral College, which Joe Biden did narrowly win. He won 306 to 232. But, if you look at the popular vote in each individual state, which is what matters, it was not a very large margin of victory. So you can look at the strengths and weaknesses of Trump's 2020 presidential campaign, something that the GOP has to model it off of, at least, somewhat, for the 2024 presidential election. So areas that Trump did do very well in, he improved in, with virtually every demographic except for college-educated white voters. He improved, vastly in urban voters. Now, this is the swing map from 2016. Obviously what sticks out is the Rio Grande Valley here, but if you go, into more urban areas, for example, you can go into an area like New York, and you can see here that areas with high amounts of minority voters did swing, very large numbers towards the Republican Party. Now, here's the swing map in New York City for reference. You can look at the Bronx, you can look at Brooklyn. You had ridiculous swings towards Donald Trump. Another example, this is Chicago, where you had the minority neighborhoods of Chicago swinging towards Donald Trump. The majority black area swung slightly towards Donald Trump, and then the majority Hispanic area swung a little bit more towards Donald Trump. You can also see this in Miami, where, of course, you had very, very ridiculous swings in areas like Kendall, Hialeah, even the, metro Miami area. And the final area I'll look at is Georgia. You had the suburbs that trended ridiculously blue, but if you look at the, urban area of Atlanta, it swung towards Trump, albeit narrowly, because black voters overall swung slightly. But, Atlanta did swing it towards Donald Trump, at least these parts of Atlanta. And so, you can see that Trump improved in urban areas generally, especially urban areas with minority voters. If minority voters, did not exist in that particular urban area, an area like Portland, for example, trended almost exclusively towards Joe Biden. Other whiter cities did trend almost exclusively towards Joe Biden, but areas with more minority voters did swing towards Donald Trump, and that was one of Trump's strengths. Now, there's many reasons you can theorize why that is, and I'll make a video about it. I have in the past, and I'll make more in the future, is that, Latino voters are generally more conservative, especially on some of those social issues that Trump tried to run on. Many Latino voters were opposed to the BLM movement, and that probably shifted some of them towards Trump's column as well. And so that is, part of the reason that you can hypothesize why Trump made gains with those voters. So, there's many reasons you can look at that as a positive for Trump, that he gained in urban areas. And if you're a Republican in 2024, you want to keep those gains. And one of the things that, Trump also did was he gained in many rural areas. You can see, of course, the Rio Grande Valley, generally quite a rural area with the exception of some of these cities down along the border. But, you look generally in the Rust Belt, you can see a lot of the rural areas here, areas like eastern Ohio, Wisconsin trended slightly towards Trump, southern Iowa, a lot of these other areas, Utah, of course, rural areas in the Northeast and in the West swung towards Biden, but, the areas, the swing states generally, the rural areas swung towards Donald Trump, and that is something that Republicans have to do, and not just the gain that Trump got, but really the margins that you got compared to a candidate like Mitt Romney, a candidate like John McCain. Trump is arguably the best Republican candidate ever for rural areas, and if you're a Republican running in 2024, you have to try and get at least similar margins to him, because if you're performing, 5-10% worse in every rural county in states like Wisconsin, Michigan, Minnesota, you're not going to win those states, and that's the reason that Republicans really weren't able to win those states in the past. That's the reason why George Bush, despite winning quite easily against John Kerry, didn't win Minnesota, Wisconsin, Michigan, or Pennsylvania. And while he won Ohio and he won Iowa in 2004, they were very narrow, and rural areas were much bluer then than they are now. So if you're a Republican running in 2024, you're going to have to keep the strength of Trump, as I said, in the urban areas, and you're going to have to keep the strengths of Trump in the rural areas. And, you can do slightly worse because of the suburbs, which I'll talk about in a second, but really you have to do more or less similar in the rural areas compared to Trump, especially in the Rust Belt areas. I mean, you could do worse in rural areas of Mississippi, but is that really going to matter? Not really. No. Same thing in Arkansas, same thing in Oklahoma, same thing in Alabama. Those states aren't going to matter as much as the swing states, the Rust Belt states. But looking at the final classification, I guess you could say, of region is suburban areas, and suburban areas is where we had those college-educated white voters, which was effectively the only main demographic that did swing towards Joe Biden in this election, and college-educated voters are disproportionately in the suburbs. That's the reason why you had ridiculous swings in the Atlanta area, in the Phoenix area. I mean, you can just zoom into each one of these areas. You look at Phoenix, you can see, the Latino areas, of course, the minority areas swung towards Donald Trump, but the whiter areas of Phoenix, and Phoenix is, does have a lot of white areas, Mesa, Glendale, Surprise, Carefree, Fountain Halls, Gilbert, those areas are whiter areas, and those swung towards Joe Biden in this election. You can look at, Dallas, you see the same thing, Austin, Houston, and you see the same thing I've talked about before, how the urban areas swung towards Trump. If you're a Republican, you want to keep those gains, and you want to limit the losses in suburban areas, because if you're gonna, do the same as Trump in urban areas, you're gonna do slightly worse than him in rural areas. You have to make that ground up in the suburbs, and in a state like Georgia, for example, the suburbs trended ridiculously towards Joe Biden. You have to stop that if you're a Republican running in 2024. And is that going to be easy to do? No, it's not going to be easy to do. If I had to look at this the way I think things are going to pan out, I think rural areas will continue to trend Republican as much as they really can, upper 80s, even lower 90s percentage points, and these suburbs are going to keep trending blue. But, if you're Republican, you have to try and stop that, especially if you want to win in the Rust Belt area, because, assuming you're going to lose a little bit of margins in the rural areas, you have to gain that back in the suburban areas. And so we look at that on the AppMS map and see, how's that going to pan out? Well, if you lose ground a little bit in rural areas, that is going to hurt you in the Rust Belt. But if you can make up that ground with suburban areas, say you do 3% better in the suburbs, well, that flips a state like Arizona, that flips a state like Georgia, maybe, that flips a state like Wisconsin, where you had, pretty substantial gains for Joe Biden in areas like Waukesha County. Now, for an example, an interesting fact, if Trump got the same margins in Waukesha County that Leah Vukmir got in 2018, Leah Vukmir lost by 10 percentage points, but she did better than Trump in the WOW counties. If Trump had gotten her margins, he would have won the state of Wisconsin. And so if you're a Republican, keep the rural margins that Trump got and do better in the suburbs. You can flip a state like Wisconsin. Same thing in Pennsylvania. The area where Joe Biden improved most in eastern Pennsylvania, he didn't do well in western Pennsylvania in terms of the trends. But if you look at eastern Pennsylvania, where the main shifts towards Joe Biden were, it was these large counties in the Philadelphia suburbs. And that's what gave Joe Biden the victory. It wasn't a victory, 1.2 percentage points, but it was a victory nonetheless. And if you're a Republican, you have to do better in those Philadelphia suburban areas, these areas that are highly highly populated, because you can get all the rural areas you want, but really the margins, the crucial margins, the make or break counties are in those suburban Philadelphia areas. So if you do better in the suburbs, you can flip Pennsylvania. And same thing in Michigan too. You can do better in Detroit, the Detroit suburbs. You can do better in the Lansing suburbs, and you can do better in other areas as well. And so if you can do better in the suburbs, you will be able to win these states, but you can't guarantee that you're going to do better in suburban areas. Now, looking at a realistic scenario, we go back to the 2020 election map. Let's just flip all of these states back. If you're a Republican, I believe that the easiest path is flipping Arizona, flipping Wisconsin, and flipping Pennsylvania. I think Michigan is just too out of reach for Republicans to win in 2024. Same thing with Georgia. I think the population growth you're seeing, the diversity that you're seeing in the state is going to be too much for Republicans to be able to win in 2024, especially if Joe Biden runs, which, he's indicated that he is leaning towards running at the moment. Nothing's confirmed, but he has indicated that. And so if you're a Republican, I think that that's the easiest path for you to take. You win back white voters in the Phoenix suburbs. You win back, slightly better margins in Waukesha County, Ozaukee County, Washington County, and you do better in the Philadelphia suburbs, and that gives you the victory. And of course, that's easier said than done, but I think that is a plausible path for the Republican Party. Now, that's one path. The second path is, say Joe Biden keeps his margins in the suburban areas of Phoenix. Well, at that point, you have to win Michigan in that scenario. You take the Rust Belt path rather than, taking a mix of all three, both of these areas, Sun Belt and Rust Belt. In this scenario, you just go in the Rust Belt, where you get those three states, three of them Biden flipped in 2020, and you win those back, you win the election. And that is also a plausible path, but it's going to be difficult to flip Michigan. Now, the other path that you could take is, maybe you flip Georgia, and you flip Arizona, and you flip Nevada. You take the Sun Belt path. Well, at this point, you would get to 270 electoral votes just from flipping those three states. Now, this path could happen. Maybe you do slightly better with Latino voters, slightly better with minority voters overall, while limiting the damage with suburban voters, because Georgia has a high population of African-American voters. Arizona has a high population of Latino voters. So does Nevada. You can improve with those voters, get those social conservative Latino voters on your side. Someone like Ron DeSantis could be able to do that. Well, you can win those three states, and you wouldn't even have to flip any of these three Rust Belt states. But honestly, I don't see that as the most likely path. Like I said before, I think the most likely path is for Arizona to flip, Nevada to stay, Georgia to stay, but Wisconsin and Pennsylvania to flip. Now, I don't think this is overall the most likely scenario for what's going to happen in 2024, but we're looking at the Republicans' path to victory, which is an uphill battle at this point. It's difficult to beat an incumbent. It was very difficult for Joe Biden to do it, even with the circumstances that you had, and I think it'll be very difficult to do it for Republican in 2024, but it is possible. And I think this is the most likely path, and we will see what happens. So thank you all for watching this video. Please like this video and subscribe to the channel. Also follow me on Twitter and join the Discord. Those are both linked down in the description. Help me get to 1,000 subscribers by May 27th. So thank you all for watching this video, and I will see you guys later.